Well, welcome everyone to this next National Weather Association's NWA Wednesday webinar series on a Monday. How about that? So my name is Elise Smith. I am a meteorologist at the CBS affiliate in Jefferson City, Missouri. I am also a part of the Membership and Marketing Committee, and we are the hosts of this month's webinar. I'm the moderator as well with my friend Chrissy, who is also here. I don't know, Chrissy, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chrissy Hurley. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service office in Nashville, Tennessee. And I have a very dirty, messy office, but you can see the Halloween candy right back there. That's why I'm not on TV. I don't know which way to point.
All good, still very important. She's also a part of the NWA's Membership and Marketing Committee with me. So we will be moderating this conversation today. So just a couple of logistics before we get started. All attendees will be kept on mute for the entirety of the webinar. We certainly encourage you to ask questions or share comments with our speakers, but please do so using the questions GUI or the raise your hand feature on the GoToWebinar on this page. You can also ask questions on Twitter. We'll be monitoring Twitter using the hashtag NWAWebinar. So if you just search that on Twitter, you'll probably see a bunch of posts already with that. We will then read the questions for you as we go along with this. Christy will be monitoring those and also Becca as well. So feel free to follow along on Twitter with the NWA account. And lastly, this presentation is being recorded and you can watch it later or tell your friends about it as well. So getting right to it, this webinar is a continuation from the theme of the annual meeting this year, and it's called How to Find and Create a Meaningful Mentorship. Pretty self-explanatory, but a little bit of background on this. At the annual meeting, there was a panel of pairs of mentors and mentees who talked about how their professional friendship, which is a mentorship, impacted their career, their life, of course, in a positive way. It's something really important and vital that can help you out as you begin to build your career, or if you're looking for another challenge in your career and maybe want to be a mentor. So we have a great pair with us today from the broadcasting community. We have Jacqueline, who is a meteorologist down in Charlotte at the ABC affiliate. There you go, nice wave. And then, of course, we have her mentor, Tim, who is a meteorologist at WLNE in Providence. So they will be talking about their mentorship. And of course, if you have any questions for them as we have this conversation, feel free to throw it out on Twitter or in the webinar feature, the raise your hand feature. So I think we're just gonna get started and talk about this awesome mentorship. So first for you, Jacqueline and Tim, we're gonna ask how and when did both of you first meet?
Jacqueline, do you wanna go?
Sure, and also I just realized when she gave a little tour of her office that there's this Islanders thing here, and I just want to point out that I'm not an Islanders fan. That's my kid. Don't hold that against me. But we met back in, gosh, 2015, so it hasn't been that long, but it feels like a long time in a good way, of course. I was finishing up classes with Mississippi State because I was kind of a last minute, oh, I guess I should be a meteorologist kind of person. And I took a digital content producer job in the meantime, and I was taking thermodynamics, which was the last class that I had to take. I think, I don't even remember, but it was killing me. And I had become friends with Tim on a very casual basis. You know, we had a mutual friend that we hung out with pretty frequently, and so we had spent a lot of time together. And at some point, I just couldn't fight through thermo on my own anymore. So we met up at a coffee shop, and he helped me out with it. And at one point he went to the restroom, and one of the people that worked at the coffee shop came over, and they were like, "That's the weather guy from News 4, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, are you like the weather apprentice?" And I was like, "That's not a thing, but now I kind of want to be." So then I just started kind of harassing him from that point forward. I used to come in on my days off and have him watch me at the weather wall, or at least set it up for me so I could get started. I learned, I think, the entirety of WSI from Tim, just kind of watching over his shoulders, or him correcting me when I was about to break the entire system. So that was super helpful. So we just spent hours and hours and hours together in preparation for me eventually moving on to the weather team at that same station. So that was kind of how we met from my perspective, and I'm sure Tim is probably like, his perspective is probably like, this annoying girl wouldn't leave me alone.
That is not true. That is not true at all. No, I was actually really excited when I found out that Jacqueline was taking classes for meteorology and trying to get her degree. And I just remember, the feeling that I had when I had the opportunity to get in front of the green screen and practice. And I had that as part of my education. I went to Lyndon State College up in Vermont, and we had a chance to get in front of the chroma key wall and do some practicing. And then I did some more, which I'll talk about later, in my first job, which was actually not on air. But I remember that excitement that I had to do that. And I remember how important it was to get in front of the chroma key. So, that's part of the excitement that I had when Jacqueline came forward and said, I'm doing this online thing. I'm getting these classes under my belt. I'm learning about thermodynamics. And of course, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. So, once she said that, I said, you got to get in front of the chroma key. Like she said, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to add to what Jacqueline just told you, but once she got in front of the chroma, it was just all gravy from there, trying to help her out and get her, to the level where she was conversational on air and maybe drop the nerves a little bit. And it was great to be able to do that with her, for sure.
Awesome. Well, how about this? How has this mentorship impacted your career and life?
Tim is just looking at the camera, so I feel like he wants me to go. Well, in addition to learning thermo, which was meaningful in its own way, the experience, somebody who really invested in me starting off and was willing to take what I guess would have been a lunch break was when I was showing up, just to stay in the weather center, which of course, as you guys probably all can relate to, if you work in news, does not have windows, generally speaking. So to stay in that dark for extra hours every day and watch this very inexperienced, very nervous person, it meant a lot. And it in a time where I was kind of starting to question whether or not I was going to do weather, if I was going to stay behind the scenes, because I do really value local news as an industry. It was really helpful to see that somebody felt like I should be in front of the wall and I should be forecasting, and also helping me to kind of translate what I learned in the classroom into something like actual physical forecasting, which as much as I love Mississippi State, when you do an online program, I feel like sometimes that can be missing at times. So to have somebody help me apply what I was learning was so helpful. So anybody who's doing the online stuff, so valuable, but just make sure you have someone there for you that can, put it into context. So there was that for sure. And I think that one of the things I valued so much in this relationship is Tim and I aren't very far apart in age as far as a mentor-mentee relationship is concerned. We're about 10 years apart. And I think that that's more unique than it seems, because a lot of times when somebody is willing to mentor somebody else, they have, decades of experience. But Tim he's still somebody that I go to. Back in, our first market, it was how to survive in TV on a small budget. And I could go to him a lot for stuff like that because he had been there recently. He had, and not super recently, of course. Tim's doing fine. Don't want you to think. But he remembers what it's like to be in a small market, and he remembered what it was like to job search, and that's been something really special because a lot of times when you pick that mentor and they've been in the same station and they've been chief forever and ever and ever, that's great. And there's so much you can learn from that. And there's so much that I've learned from my mentor relationships like that. But I've also gleaned a lot of how to survive and live in this industry, especially when you're new, from Tim.
Yeah, and to add to that, when Jacqueline first told me about, her endeavors at Mississippi State and wanting to transition to an on-air role, I saw a lot of excitement from her that I hadn't maybe seen in a little while, because I had just come from a small market, which sometimes, when you're first starting out, it can be a little bit tough, as Jacqueline kind of alluded to here. And I was about halfway through my contract in Reno. We were in Reno, Nevada. I was halfway through my contract there at the station, and that meant I had a year and a half left, and I had a year and a half to decide, what's my next move. And there were times, you have to remember that I was forecasting in the desert during a drought. There were 7-day forecasts that had nothing but sunshine all the way across and 85, 90 degrees all the way across. It got exciting at times. I'm not saying that it was like that all year, but there were weeks that it was like that. And that's when you start to question, am I doing the right thing? Is this where I want to be? And then as soon as I was able to step into that role as a mentor for Jacqueline, that really excited me again for the business. And I was so happy to, be able to work with her and see her progress and start to remember the reasons why I got into this, and remember how I had come from the same position and gotten to the point where I felt relatively comfortable on air. And now to help someone else do that, now I kind of had a reason to keep going in that particular role. And then that helped me to move on to where I am now. Also, the great thing about having a mentor is that eventually they get to your level or maybe even surpass you. And in some ways, Jacqueline has surpassed me. So we're almost switching roles now. I look up to her a lot. She really has kept me going as far as, improving my on-air performance, improving my social media presence, things that are very important in our field. And she also continues to further her education. When I, have found myself getting a little bit comfortable in the role that I'm in, I look to her and I'm like, wait a minute, she's going way past me here. Maybe I need to catch up too. So that's affected my career in that way. She not only kept me going in my last job, now she's, kind of pushing me forward to try and make sure that I stay on the same level as her at this point. So I wouldn't say that we're totally switching roles, but we're kind of showing some signs of that right now, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. The mentor-mentee relationship, there's a give and take. It's a two-way street. So it's been really exciting to see some of that come around over the last year or so, now that she's moved to a bigger market than me, and I get to kind of look up to her in a way too.
Oh, stop.
That's very awesome. You two are very lucky because you kind of just, fell into this mentor-mentee relationship. Any advice to those out there listening, watching this at a later date? What is the best way to find a mentor? It's very, very difficult, especially in this field. And maybe now, Jacqueline, you're in that role of mentor. What's the best way to find one?
Well, for me and Tim, because we started off as friends, I think that made it so much easier to eventually kind of step into that role and ask him for job help, because we had been friends, so that seemed natural. But I will say that sometimes finding a mentor or asking somebody to help you out, it's like more awkward than dating sometimes, because you kind of have to take it slow and you don't want to push anyone away, and it's a whole thing. But I think you really have to. That's the biggest key, is you really do have to take it slow, because when you're looking for a new mentor, you have to keep in mind they're doing 1,500 things for their own career, and they're working on certifications, or they're maybe looking for a new job and stuff like that. So when you're asking for help, don't ask for too much up front, and let requests simmer for a while before you send another one. So that's something that I try to do. And it, like I said, it really does feel like dating. But I also think that it really helps if you have a basis where you get along really well, because I do have a few people that I really value their work, and I think that they're phenomenal meteorologists that I've gleaned a lot of advice from. But the true mentor-mentee relationship, I think it's most effective long-term when you just really do get along and you have a lot in common. I have another mentor, a little shout out to Scott Harbaugh, WPXI in Pittsburgh, who he and I get along really well. We are, that's one that has stood the test of time. He actually kind of makes a habit of changing my life in weird ways. He got me into the Mississippi State program. He told me about it, and then he helps me get this job. So he just casually, kind of like a fairy godmother, changes my life randomly, which is nice. But that one is one that we've maintained because we have similar personalities. And so I think that at the NWA conference, actually, I think that somebody had said it's a professional friendship. And that's really what it is. And you need the friend part of it too.
Yeah, as Jacqueline mentioned too, we were lucky, and as you mentioned as well, we were lucky to just kind of fall into this because we were already working in the same place. Jacqueline was fortunate in a way because she was already working at a TV station, despite the fact that it wasn't in weather. She was working in our web department. She was doing some newsy stuff, posting social media, posting articles to the website, and many other things as well. And she was amazing at that job. But she took that job, I think, to kind of get into the business while she was still studying, as she talked about, for her degree in meteorology. That said, as you mentioned, she kind of fell into this friendship and then this mentor-mentee relationship, which was fantastic. And not everyone's going to be in that situation. So I think the key that I'm trying to get to is you have to ask. You have to reach out. You're not going to get a yes if you don't ask. So email. If there's, let's say it's TV, not everyone is TV, but let's say it's TV and you want to do broadcast meteorology. You have local meteorologists in your market. Who's the big name? Reach out to them. Maybe they can put you in touch with someone else if they can't do it. Jacqueline said, respect their time, respect the fact that they're really busy. Here's my advice. They should be excited to hear from you, and they should be really excited that you want to be a meteorologist. And if they're not, maybe that's not your mentor, and that's okay. You may take a little while to find the right person, but you want to reach out. Don't put it off. Don't keep delaying it. I delayed a couple of things in my career. I didn't reach out for an internship when I should have. And that, meant that I didn't get an internship, at least not in the broadcast field. I ended up getting one outside the broadcast field, which is great. But I didn't get one in the broadcast field because I waited until like September of my senior year in college. So a little late. Oh, well. That's what I mean. You got to reach out now, and then it'll happen down the road. And it may not be the first person you reach out to, but don't give up. If you want a mentor, you'll find your mentor. You'll get there.
Nice. Okay. So then I guess a follow-up question then. We've been talking about this mentor-mentee relationship with Jacqueline and Tim, but what advice have you gotten from other mentors that you might have, or Jacqueline with you? We've been talking about you as a mentee, but do you see yourself as a mentor yet? And then Tim, of course, following up with some of your mentors that you've had in your career.
Do you want to go first, Jacqueline? Okay. So I was lucky in a way because when I was coming out of college, I just mentioned the fact that I really didn't have an internship in the broadcast field, which would have been very helpful to get my first on-air job. I would have had a demo reel from that instead of just my demo reel from college, which was not great. I would have, maybe gotten that first on-air job right away. But it happened that, so I'm from the Boston area, which is a relatively big market, and it happened that my one of my local stations was hiring a weather producer, which would do all the same thing that the meteorologist does, except go on camera. So building graphics, posting stuff to the web, et cetera, kind of a support system for the on-air meteorologists. And I applied for it and I happened to get it. Part of the interview process was they wanted to know my aspirations down the road. And I said, I want to be on air, eventually, but I don't know if I'm ready for it just yet. I'm really nervous when I get in front of a camera. I stumble a lot. I'm not there. So I took this non-air role, so this weather producer job. And it happened that I was working with 4 meteorologists who were people that I'd been watching for years, people that I respected for a long time. In fact, I was quite intimidated when I first started working there. I was super nervous in the interview. My first couple of months, I was like, I cannot believe I'm working with these people that I've been watching for a long time and have looked up to for a long time. And eventually, all 4 of them, even though we never really officially called it a mentor-mentee kind of thing, all 4 of them really became my mentors. I looked to them for help in becoming better on air. I looked to them for advice on, where to apply for jobs and how to apply for jobs and what should be on my demo reel. And I spent 2.5 years there. And I would say the first year and 3 quarters, I didn't get up in front of the wall at all. I was too nervous. It was an open newsroom where standing at the chroma key wall behind the camera, everyone was sitting out there, all the producers, all the writers, the news director, everyone could hear me practice. So I never practiced because I was so nervous. And one day, one of those 4 meteorologists, the one that I worked with primarily on my shift, turned to me and she said, "Are you ever going to get in front of the wall? Are you ever going to do this? Because if you don't, you're not going to move on. You're going to be stuck here." And that kind of set in. And she's like, "The point is for people to hear you. You realize that, right?" So then it kind of like, all right, well, I got to get over it. Then I got up and I started practicing, and I was a mess and I was awful. And then I got better, and then I got better, and I made a tape, and I moved on to my first on-air job, which was fantastic. So all 4 of them, she was the one that I primarily worked with, but all 4 of them really became my mentors, whether they realized it or not, just because of the fact that they had all gone through the same process. You know, they were all had all worked in smaller markets, medium markets, got into bigger markets, and they all were fantastic on air. And I had so much I could learn from them that, you know, they really became my mentors in a way. And still I contact them once in a while, I'll send them stuff, and I'm like, "Hey, can you watch this demo reel?" And they'll pick it apart, and I go ahead and try to get better.
I think that one of the absolute best things you can do is just send somebody your reel. And you know what? It doesn't mean that you're asking them for a job. It doesn't mean that anything other than you've seen their work, you respect and appreciate their work, and you want to know how you can be more at that level. I think it's a huge compliment. So to answer your question about me becoming a mentor, I'm starting to get there. The first few years of your career are absolute chaos, but now I'm starting to see things calm down. So anytime somebody sends me a reel, I first of all think it's like the highest compliment that somebody saw what I did and liked it so much that they wanted to do something similar. And I take a lot of time to do that. I'll watch it a few times and get all the feedback that I can, send a long email, probably longer than anybody wanted or expected, about what I think. And I've loved doing that. So I have one mentee who's still in college right now, is somebody that I started mentoring back in Reno. And that one has been really nice because in college, you know, you're learning so much so fast that it's interesting to kind of watch that process go through just being a few years out. And but at this point, most of my mentoring goes into just a simple thing like sending a reel and getting feedback. And you never know. I mean, sometimes that could end up with jobs. I've heard of people who do send reels and somebody liked it so much that instead of feedback, they do offer them a job. So don't go into expecting that, but I think that it's one of the most powerful things you can do. So I still do it too. I still send my reel out, and I'm very, very happy with where I am and no intention of leaving anytime soon. But sometimes I'll send reels out to chiefs just to see what I could be doing better, because one thing that I think a lot of people can agree on is if you watch somebody's reel too many times, if you watch so much of somebody, then you kind of become, it's similar to watching yourself, you kind of become numb to the things. So I like to get fresh eyes on my content all the time, and I think that that's one of the best ways to grow. So never be afraid, and if there's any young people who want to send a reel, send it my way, I'll watch it.
Awesome. So I've been monitoring social media just a little bit. Sorry, Chrissy, I didn't want to interrupt you, but again, you can be using the hashtag NWA webinar to join in the conversation and ask questions that way, or feel free to ask questions through the GoToWebinar. But Chrissy, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, you know, one question I have is, you know, how do you overcome being nervous, you know, contacting, just sending your content to somebody? Because I mean, you know, I'm not in broadcast, and I still kind of get nervous. You know, talking to these bigwig TV meteorologists, and here I am, just, you know, back behind the scenes. I can't imagine being a college student and sending just a cold email to them. You know, what is the best way to go about that? I mean, what's the opener you use? You know, you say it's a lot like dating. How do you go about doing that?
I would say it's just like sending a rough draft of a paper that you've written to someone else to read. It's no different. And I know it's your face, I know it's your voice, I know you're very self-conscious when you see yourself, and people don't like to see themselves recorded when they're first starting out. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it really is just the same as sending a rough draft of a paper. You've written it, you've sent it, it's going to come back with red ink on it, it's going to come back with some notations, it's going to come back with whatever, but that's what you wanted. You wanted feedback so that you could improve. So it can be nerve-wracking, and I'm not sure how you would open it other than to say, listen, I'm an aspiring meteorologist, really want to do this on air, really looking for some feedback, and I can't think of anyone better to look at this, but whoever it is. The worst that they can do is say, listen, I don't have time right now, or I'm, remember, they might have something going on in their lives or their career, but the worst that they can say is, I really can't right now, maybe later, or, you reach out to someone else, and that's okay, that might happen, but you can't be nervous about it. You have to be excited for it. You have to be really excited to send it out and say, I can't wait for so-and-so to see this, and maybe it's going to come back and be like, wow, you have a lot of work to do, or maybe it's going to come back and say, maybe just tweak a couple of things, but it's going to come back with something.
I, on the other hand, have never not been nervous about anything I've ever done. I'm a very anxious person. So I think it's helpful and it's humbling. And I think that the best thing you can do is, when you're making that reel, make sure that, out of respect for yourself, so you don't get some silly feedback that you kind of already know the answer to, and out of respect for their time, make sure that that demo you're sending is your absolute best work. Act like you're applying to a job, make the reel like you're looking for a new job, and that's what you should be sending out. Because if you just send them out some random forecast that you've just recently done, and you know in your heart of hearts that it's not your best work, you're going to hear things that you already knew about yourself, and it's not going to be useful to anybody. So that's one thing that I do, is I send out just the absolute best thing that I've done, and just hope that they can, give me some new things to work on there. And that's kind of the way you have to look at it too, is the things that they're giving you are little projects. It's a similar thing to those of us who have worked with consultants when they give you some advice. Some of it you take into consideration, some of it you realize probably isn't right for you, but some of it you take under consideration. You maybe write it down on a Post-it note and you work at it over time. Nobody's going to tell you, you're horrible and you should quit what you're doing. They're going to give you some probably more broad-based things that you can work on over time and just kind of think about as you're working towards whatever it is your goal is. So think of it as projects that they're giving you. And as far as sending the email, I think as simple as you can keep it is best. I just like when people tell me, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is where I'm at in my career, and this is what I'm hoping for. Here's my reel, what do you think? And if you, include about how much you love weather, of course, that'll make the person who's opening it more excited, because of course we're excited about weather. So don't be afraid to mention that you're a huge weather geek, because it goes pretty far with meteorologists most of the time. And that's pretty much the easiest way to do it. Just tell them who you are and what you're about.
And then a follow-up, this was somewhat brought up in your answers, but having that person you can go to ask the tough questions. How did you both know within this professional friendship, as you alluded to as well, Jacqueline, that for you, Jacqueline, Tim was someone that you could trust and felt comfortable with seeking advice from? And then Tim, how did you feel giving that advice or hearing those words from Jacqueline? So just take that as you would.
Yeah, I think the friendship piece is really most important when it comes to something like this. Of course, it's important for a lot of it. You don't want this to feel like a job for either person. So that's half of why we keep saying that friendship is so important. But also, you need somebody who maybe knows you well enough to know how you would like to accept that feedback and respect that method. I like to think that I like it pretty straightforward, and Tim has always been pretty good about just telling me what I need to work on, and that is what it is. And sometimes I'll follow up with a compliment, which makes me feel good. So that's always a good method to do it too. But I think that you have to appreciate and kind of like the person enough to not want to hurt their feelings. And on the flip side, if you're the person taking that feedback, you have to know that what they're saying to make you a better meteorologist. They're not saying it to bring you down or anything like that. they're telling you because they genuinely are invested in you at that point and want you to be better.
Yeah, and I think Jacqueline's attitude really helped as far as if I'm going to be straightforward with someone, it's for your own benefit. And I would hope that you would do the same for me if you see me doing something I need to improve on. The same thing. I'm not going to take it personally, but there are people in the world who, when you give them feedback and when you give them maybe a few things to improve on, they might take that personally as an attack, and it's not. It's not meant that way. And Jacqueline was always really good about that. She was always really accepting of anything I had to say, whether it was good or bad. I mean, I had certainly feedback to improve, but I also had feedback like, hey, I really liked how you said this, that, and the other. I might actually steal that to use on air, you know, because she has that personality that really connects with a viewer straight off the bat. Whereas, you know, sometimes I get a little bit too scientific. So it was a give and take where you know, I might have ways to like, I don't think I can think of an example off the top of my head, but you know, I might go into her and say like, I really think you need to incorporate this better or say this better. But then, you know, the next time she does it, like, wow, okay, well, that was great. Now I want that for on air. So and then, like I said, the attitude really played a big role in that. You know, she didn't take that as an insult. She did the hit again, the weather hit again, and said, how was that? Was that better? And it's like, well, yeah, thanks.
Another side note, though, is when people give you feedback, at least try it. Even, you know, consultants, if you're already in the industry, mentors, anything like that, when somebody tells you to change something, even if it doesn't feel right to you, just give it a shot. I mean, there are things that, you know, I know don't work well with my style, but, you know, you might be surprised, first of all, because a lot of things that I thought wouldn't work with my style work perfectly fine, as it turns out. But the other side of it is you really need to respect that the person who's giving you that feedback, they thought it out. They didn't just blurt something out and just to say something. And for you to be like, nah, I don't know about that, I'm not going to do that. It can come across that you don't take feedback well. And it's much easier just to give it a shot, and you'll probably surprise yourself. And that's not to say that Tim ever gave me any bad feedback, by the way, because I don't think I remember a single piece of feedback that Tim gave me that I didn't incorporate immediately and then use for the rest of my life. Just something that you know, keep in mind. I'm a very smiley person, and somebody once told me to smile more, and I was like, my face will break. That's it. Put it out. You see how it goes, and if it doesn't work for you, you get to throw it out. That's the beauty of what we do, is that there's always another weather hit coming up right after that.
Oh yeah, repetition is key for sure. You're not, like you said, you're not always going to have a good weather hit. You're not always going to be able to use that advice successfully, but at least try it, as you mentioned. I mean, that's the key for sure. I agree.
That's fantastic. You know, have either of you ever considered, I guess, you know, having a mentor maybe outside of broadcast or maybe outside of weather? Do you ever have anybody like that, or is that something to even pursue or waste time on?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Oh, that's funny.
I think for me, I have a couple already, because part of my job, and for those that are not in the business or have not gotten into the business yet and want to be, sometimes you have jobs where, like mine right now, I'm doing weather 2 days a week, but I'm doing news reporting 3 days a week. And so I have mentors within my own newsroom at the station that maybe don't know that they're my mentors, but they are. And they're kind of everyone's mentors. Like, they're the people that have been here 20 plus years, and everyone looks up to them for advice. And they help me with writing and with telling a non-science story. You know, I'll have stories that have nothing to do with weather, that have nothing to do with science or anything even in that vein at all. And that person will really help me, or those people will really help me with that. And they're kind of my mentors in that way. I wouldn't say that means that I'm looking to them for career advice within the news side of it, because it's not necessarily my goal 100%. I'd like to move back toward, I've done my last job in Reno when I was working with Jacqueline was 100% weather, Monday through Friday, morning weather. Right now, I'm not in that role, but I would like to get back to that role. So it's not that they're my mentor in a career sense, but they do help me succeed in my current role. And if my next role does include news reporting, that'll help me in that way as well. So I think it depends on what your goals are, and it depends on what you're doing, but it is worth it to, talk to people who aren't in. And the other side of that is that same person or anyone in the newsroom that's not a meteorologist can also kind of serve to give you advice on your forecast, because they're the recipient of the forecast. They're the ones who don't know meteorology. They're the ones who don't know the science behind it. And it's my job to translate that science and make it understandable for the viewer. And in a way, they're viewers, because they're listening to the forecast and they're like, hey, I don't understand what this meant. Maybe you should explain that the next time. So they're almost mentors in a way, because they're shaping. And we might be getting out of the mentor realm a little bit into more advice, just general advice, but it's still worth it to reach out to other people that you work with, or other people that are not in weather or not in broadcasting, because they can help you to understand what the viewer's looking for as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad you went first, because I had to think about this, and I realized that in my day-to-day life, I actually love mentoring, and there's all kinds of different ways you can do that. But one of the things that I find to be really valuable is women in STEM is just, unfortunately, still, I mean, we have 3 out of 4 right now, women in STEM, but usually the bias is the other way. And so that's something that, without even really meaning to, I think women in science, at least I do, we like to take each other under each other's wings and support each other no matter what. So I think that that's such a unique thing. And absolutely, if another meteorologist that didn't necessarily want to be in broadcasting just needed a meteorology mentor, or I recently had a Girl Scout troop come in, and a few of them wanted to be scientists, not necessarily meteorologists, but I thought that was so cool. And I loved giving them some like general getting into science advice. So yeah, absolutely open to any type of mentoring, especially for the women out there, because you just stick together stuff.
I wanted to add something too that you just actually kind of prompted, because I kind of ignored the other side of the question when I was answering, which was reaching out to meteorologists who are not in broadcasting. That's huge. That's huge to make sure that you continue to forward your science understanding, because sometimes in TV, we don't relay to the viewer all the science that's behind the forecast. We're not talking about 500 millibar this and blah blah blah. Like, we're not going into that on air. And sometimes that means that maybe we could be better serviced by a conversation with a meteorologist who deals with that a lot more and does have to relay that. Maybe your National Weather Service meteorologists who are writing the discussion that you're reading in the Weather Center every day when you make your forecast. That's a good person to help further your science understanding. If you don't feel like you're solid in that way, maybe that's a great resource as well. So I didn't mean to ignore that part of the question, but there you go.
I actually want to add a little bit more to that, just to build on each other. I think that like a partnership, which is sometimes in ways a dual mentorship with your National Weather Service office, is extremely useful, because we're all doing the same job, we're just doing it in kind of different ways. And so what Tim said is, yeah, sometimes we need the refresher on some of the more complex science that we probably, most broadcasters have about 5 seconds to forecast in the morning. So stuff that we don't really get to delve into, sometimes it's good to just have somebody there to do a refresher there. But on the other side, what the broadcasters bring to the table is we have to communicate everything that we're doing. And sometimes it is very complicated on a very, very base level. And so I think that that's a way in which we can help each other. And I love our National Weather Service office here in our area. And we've done a lot too to talk about things like hurricane forecasting and severe weather forecasting when we're trying to communicate a threat to our audience. Which ways can we do it, and how can we utilize each other better? And so I guess it's kind of delving off of the mentorship path a little bit, but partnerships, when you find that relationship that goes both ways, I think that that's a really beneficial thing. And I think that also too starts with the friendship and a mutual respect too, so that it doesn't feel like you're telling the other person necessarily how to do their job, just giving that feedback on, you know, I need some help with this. And I noticed that maybe your communication of this weather package, let's maybe tweak the wording of that slightly so we don't scare people or something like that. And I think that it really is kind of the same as the mentorship.
Yeah, I cannot agree more about the partnership between broadcast and the National Weather Service, because, I mean, let's face it, you know, we need your help a lot to help with communication. And I mean, I think it's fantastic. And so even if you want to be in broadcast, it doesn't hurt to see it from the other side, from the government perspective or some private weather company as well. And vice versa. If you know that that's what you want to do, weather service, you know, branch out to the broadcaster too. It definitely helps.
Okay, so as this conversation is kind of coming to a close, I guess our final question for Jacqueline and Tim would be, what is one key quality you should look for in a mentor or a mentee that would lead to a meaningful mentorship?
Well, I think that a lot of what we talked, oh, sorry. I think that a lot of what we talked about, ironically, because I just cut you off, is respect. I think that that keeps coming up in our conversation. You just have to have a mutual respect for the work that someone else is doing, and the help that they're giving you, or the help that you're giving them. And, you know, I think that in a lot of ways, mentorship goes both ways, and you also have to respect that relationship. So to boil it all down, I mean, yeah, respect is a huge piece of what you need to be looking for.
And I talked about this at the beginning, but it's worth mentioning again. There needs to be an excitement there. The mentor and the mentee both need to be in it for the right reasons, excited for what they're going to learn, and excited to spend time together and have conversations and talk about all the things that are going well, all the things that need to be improved on. And if you're not getting that sense of excitement, you're not in the right place. I think that's the number one key. If it's, you know, let's say you're looking for a mentor and you reach out to someone, they're like, yeah, I guess I can give you 5 minutes here. That's not the right person. That's not who you want. You know, it's a commitment on both ends, and there needs to be a sense of excitement there.
Great. Okay, well, Christy, I don't know if you have anything else to add before we close. No. Okay, well, I would like to first thank Tim and Jacqueline for joining us for this continuation of what was the theme at the annual meeting this year. And, you know, I don't think mentorships, you know, we also talked about how they're not necessarily defined at first. They're professional friendships, but as someone who might be starting out as a student within the NWA, just to remind you that there are resources. These are two great examples that are within the NWA who are mentors and have also been mentees. So just finding that person who can help guide you through your career, and who knows, you will likely become a mentor yourself at some point. So that's all we have for now, though, unless anyone has anything last minute they want to add to this conversation. No. Okay. Great.
Actually, I have one quick thing, which is that at some point, and I'm going to put this on the webinar because I'm going to hold you to it, Tim. I don't know which side you are. Looking. Going to road trip to the NWA conference some year.
Yes.
It's going to happen. It needs to happen. And that's going to be one of the biggest landmarks of our mentor-mentee.
For sure, for sure. We tried to do this last one and we didn't make it. Well, Jacqueline made it. I couldn't make it, but yeah, that's for sure.
Awesome. Great goal list there. So yes, but besides that, stay tuned for our next webinar that's going to be happening next month. And thanks again for everyone who has joined us for this conversation, and we'll see you all next month.